Where do you begin with enlightenment work? Well, one of the first things that I recommend is to genuinely start realizing that you are not the ego. Now, to do this, you want to become very aware of what the ego is and what it feels like within your direct experience. You can do this by asking yourself, what is my deepest feeling of selfishness? What is my deepest and most raw feeling of, oh, I'm separate from everyone else, and I need to protect myself and stay alive? Now, whatever comes up for you after asking this is a pointer to ego within you. And this ego, it's not some unimportant thing. No, ego, if you really look at it, is a remarkably intelligent selfishness, which is actually the single and biggest obstacle to enlightenment. The denser the ego, the less likely you're going to awaken. But thankfully, this ego, despite how real and convincing it feels, is actually an illusion. And what this means is your ego appears to be you, but isn't the real you. It veils the real you. And that real you, of course, is the universe within. Now, if you're an intuitive person, you actually already know this. You have noticed throughout your life that ego is this false thing that has always been getting in your own way and causing you suffering. You know that this ego, this thing that's always making you be in survival mode, caring about yourself, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, that thing is not you. That's not your deepest and truest self. And that what you really are, even if you're not aware of it all the time, is something much, much more than that. Now, you probably don't know how to explain this or what to do about it, but you definitely know that somewhere within you, this ego is not the full thing. It's not the full truth. And the great thing about this is you feeling or intuiting the falseness of your ego is actually the perfect prerequisite for awakening or enlightenment. Because with enlightenment, you do actually allow this ego to drop away. And so you having already sensed that it's not the answer, it's false, makes the process of surrendering it or transcending it much, much easier. Now you might be thinking, I understand this intellectually, but how do I begin to see through this illusion? Well, what I recommend doing is the following. I recommend that you get your first and relatively simple awakening of, I am not the ego. Now, in terms of how you do this, you're looking for a breakthrough. And you can achieve this breakthrough in many different ways. One good place to start is by constantly observing and questioning your own ego. And doing this, you will start to notice many different things about yourself. You will notice that it's a real grind to exist as an ego. It's a very effortful existence because you're always trying to get somewhere or find something. And that thing, whatever it may be, never really completes you, even if you found the thing. Now, you may also notice that having an ego has prevented you from achieving lasting peace and happiness in life. And you want to think here, what's up with that? Why is that not a thing? Why can't I just naturally be peaceful? Right, you want to get really, really curious and very skeptical of this ego and whether or not it's actually ever going to do it for you within your lifetime. Next, you want to start seeing that all of your fear, stress, and anxiety all comes from this ego. You want to pinpoint something that causes you suffering, for example, stress, and you want to see how it always traces back to the ego each and every time. And you want to see that the reason that this happens is because the ego is trying to keep itself alive by being selfish. And what you need to notice in particular is how this selfishness makes you feel. For example, you might experience some internal friction, or maybe you see yourself being forced to look at the world in a very limited way. Now, the thing that stuck with me when I was learning this was hearing this kind of question. And by the way, this sounds pretty judgmental. It's actually not. It's just a very deeply honest observation of the nature of the mind. And so here it is. Have you ever noticed that all you do all day long is care about yourself and your survival, and how each thought is self-centered and relates back to you and the survival of your own particular self or character, right? It kind of makes you think. Now, what's funny to me is if a foolish person were to hear this, they might say, "What, me? I would never think like that. I care about others." Okay, Now, what would a wise person say? A wise person would say, oh, I get you. I am intimately familiar with the selfishness of my own mind. I don't hide it. I know that this ego is the most selfish thing in the universe. And unfortunately, I find myself identifying with it far more than I'd like to admit. So you can see here the difference in the intellectual honesty between a foolish person and a wise person when it comes to admitting the nature of the mind that they have, which for spiritual enlightenment is absolutely essential. Now, getting back to having your first breakthrough, once you've been having these kinds of observations and have been contemplating like this over and over again for months and months and months on end, eventually you may get an aha moment, a deep insight or a realization where you really sense, oh my God, I'm not the ego. I'm not the ego. I can kind of see it, but that's not me. Now, again, to refer to my own personal path here, I actually had this experience in a bathroom a few years ago. And what caused it was me deeply contemplating how this ego that I was identifying with was causing me to really care about certain things. In particular, I was stuck on desire, particularly sexual desire. And I was very tired of suffering because of it. And I was so unbelievably ready to find out what's more, what's beyond it, so I could move on from the suffering. And so I'd been doing my contemplation, and I was standing in this bathroom, reflecting on my life, and boom, in this contemplative state of mind, I realized, dude, I am really not this character. There is this awareness, or this emptiness, or this knowing, which is completely silent, completely empty. And I've got to admit, I am that. That's what I am before I am this ego. And from that place of awareness, I could actually witness the suffering of my own ego. I could see it. And I became very conscious of how that suffering was not what I actually am. So anyway, from this moment forward, I got pretty excited. I remember wanting to share it with a few people, close friends and family. And I remember wanting to ask them things like, have you had it too? Have you realized it as well? Have you know that all of your suffering is created by ego, and that you are not this ego, and that you are consciousness? Do you see it too? And sadly, no. People, for the most part, do not care about awakening work. They are quite comfortable with their lives, with their ego, and that's completely okay. In fact, what this did do for me, for the Seb character, is it led me back to my true self even more, my true nature. And that is, of course, the same as yours. That is the universe, consciousness, or awareness. And I'm grateful that that was the case, because the lack of distractions from the outside encouraged me to take the work even more seriously, to go even deeper within. Now, just to clarify on what we've talked about here, remember that in order for this awakening work, any of this, to appeal to you, a really strong force, something so strong that it compels you to start detaching from your own mind, is what's necessary. And this is no easy thing. For most people, deep suffering is this force that they use that propels them into taking this work very seriously. So if you find yourself with suffering, I strongly encourage you to use that consciously and to direct it not in the pursuit of something like pleasure or escapism, but in the pursuit of truth and higher levels of wisdom and consciousness. That is what will grow you and ultimately lead you to start waking up and seeing the truth. So, to conclude, the specific awakening I've suggested you aim for is I am not the ego. And the specific method that I've recommended here is contemplation and questioning. But remember, you can also use meditation, silence, or introspection. Keep in mind, the spiritual path, it can get really heavy really quickly. And so that's why when you're just starting out, you do want to focus on getting your foundational awakenings down. And that's because when you do move on to the kind of more advanced work, you're going to be a lot more prepared and you're going to be more familiar and mature with this type of work that you're doing. So have patience, be where you are, meditate every day for the best results, and good luck. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you would like more videos, then my friend, please do subscribe.